was lived in by two prominent families in the 19th century. First the Woodruffs, then the Fontaine family, hence the title, Woodruff Fontaine House. The Woodruffs were here. They had the home built in 1871. They moved in 1871. They were only here till 1883. In 1883, the Fontaine family moved in. And the Fontaine family was here. Their time here in the mansion spanned close to 46 years. The death of the matriarch, Mrs. Virginia Fontaine, in 1928, that actually put an end to the home being a private residence.
What would you describe the architect? Is it Victorian?
Now, technically, it's kind of lumped into the French Victorian category. However, it is Second Empire. Second Empire is a style that started popping up in France under the reign of Napoleon III. And when you look at the outside of our mansion, you'll see the beautiful sloped, what they call the mansard roof. And some of the architectural detailing was very popular for the Second Empire. So technically this is a Second Empire, and we'll just call it French Victorian because that's really what it is. And I love architecture, and that's another thing. I love it when guests come in with their knowledge of architectural styles too, because I've learned some things from guests. Yeah. It's always fun.
How big is the home?
Well, it's 6 levels when you count the basement all the way up to the uppermost level. We have 2 smaller levels that aren't for living purposes. We call it the tower. So you're 6 levels deep and you're over 11,000 square feet.
Wow.
The tower, 2 upper levels on the tower, 3 fully furnished floors of living space, and then our basement. So that's 6 levels.
Wow. So what can people expect when they come here for a tour?
They can expect to see some very lovely, beautiful antiquities. The majority of the antiques, they are period. They did not belong to family members. Some pieces here did belong to families that were donated back by their descendants. When we first opened in 1964, we were empty. We were open for architectural tours, and we started receiving donations. But they can expect to see some beautiful antiquities. We like to have stories with our pieces. They can see some lovely antique textiles. Depending on the season, they can see anything from a lovely summer frock to an exquisite ball gown from the 19th century. They can hear stories about our families, their prominence here in the city, and how they helped develop Memphis in the early days. It's an experience you just want to be here for. We host museum fundraising events. We have some really fun events through the year. We have twilight tours that we do at least once a month, where we do behind the scenes evening tours. And I love to bring guests through here so they can see how beautiful it looks in the evening. Twilight tours are very popular. Like I said, we do those like at least once a month. When we get closer to our really popular seasons of like September, October, November, I'll try to get more than one on the books because they are very popular and they will sell out. And it's lovely. You come through here and you see the low lights and the beautiful candles, fake candles, of course. So that's always fun to have people come in the evening. It's just, it takes it's a totally different look at the home, a totally different way the home looks. Okay, so over here, this is Amos and Phoebe Woodruff. These are watercolors of them when they were a bit younger. This is Amos and Phoebe, a bit older, and their 4 children. From the left over here, that is Sally. She was the eldest child. Over here is Molly, the second oldest, and then Corabelle and Frank, the 2 youngest. Frank was the youngest of all the children. And they also had a son that died in infancy. They are originally from Rahway, New Jersey. Mr. Woodruff was a very successful businessman in Rahway, New Jersey. He owned a very successful carriage making business at that time, and many other businesses. He wanted to expand his company. So he came down from Rahway, New Jersey to Memphis in the mid-1840s because he wanted to see what opportunities were here to be had. We've been a city since 1819, but Memphis really started making waves across the nation when it was discovered how our neighboring states, Mississippi and Arkansas, how rich that delta soil was for things like cotton crops. and many opportunities to happen in Memphis, a newly formed port city. So here he comes from New Jersey, and he decides apparently straight away that he likes it. He wants to not just expand his business, but he wanted to become a community member. He wanted to make Memphis their permanent home, his family's permanent home. At that time, it was he and Phoebe, his wife, who, by the way, was never too crazy about moving down here to Memphis, which I can't really say that I blame her. She was a well-to-do, already established social maven right outside of New York City. So you can imagine it was kind of bleak, the thought of her coming down here to this, well, we can't say it any other way. It was a backwater, frontier, really nasty river town. It was 19th century America. But you know, Phoebe being a female, she didn't have any rights. Females had little to no rights in the 19th century. If you were married, you did what your husband said, so she had to come down here with Amos, and they started their family. Sally was born in New Jersey, and then they expanded their family, and when they first came here, they were living downtown because everything was going on just a few blocks east of the river. But in 1870, he purchased this 2-acre plot of land. Other gentlemen had started buying up parcels of land out here in what was then the outskirts of Memphis so they could get away from the city goings on, kind of that filth and what have you, and have some land, a little bit of land out here, and have a prestigious home built. And Amos wanted Phoebe to feel like the queen of her own castle. She would go back to New Jersey homesick, and he was wanting that to kind of like, come on, Phoebe, let's stay put. So the story goes, this is a story that's always been passed down to us, that the mansion was built to appease Phoebe. And that's not a bad thing. She needed to be appeased. She sacrificed a lot to come down here. So they broke ground in 1870 and moved in 1871 in late autumn. They were only here about 12 years though. A lot of work for only being here about 12 and a half years. Okay, so in 1883, after the Woodruffs were only here about 12 and a half years, sadly, there were circumstances that they could not control that made them sell the mansion. One of those being Memphis during the yellow fever epidemics of the 1870s. They were horrific. 1873, the Woodruffs had only been here a couple of years. 1873, a bout of fever came through, yellow fever. It was really bad. It was horrific. But only around 2,000 souls died. I say only 2,000 because 5 years later, in 1878, it was literally hell on earth here. Fever came rolling through in early August, and it did not let up until the first hard frost at the end of October. And take in mind that at that time in American history, they still did not know yet what was causing the fever. We know now, of course, and we're very well protected in our part of the world, it's mosquito-borne, it's mosquito-transmitted. At that time, they had a feeling it had to do with some summer, some water, some swamps, etc. But it was every man for himself. We have to do what we can do. But there was no, at that time, there weren't like really strict sanitary protocol in cities, etc. That would come after. But anyway, so Mr. Woodruff, like many businessmen here at that time after 1878, Memphis was left like a ghost town. We were just under 50,000 in early 1878. Memphis was to be the New York City of the South. We were growing so fast. We were just leaps and bounds. We were producing more millionaires at that time in the country than any other place in the United States, and we were bound for glory. However, once that fever set upon us in 1878, it was, like I said, hell on earth. After the hard frost in October, when the dust settled, as they say, and the air cleared, we were down to possibly around 7,000 to 9,000 people. There was a mass exodus in the early days of the fever. If you weren't dying from it, you were running from it. That's how it was. And most of those people that ran from it just would not come back. And Memphis was left a ghost town. Many businesses closed down. Mr. Woodruff, of course, like many other businessmen, really their personal fortunes took a huge hit. That combined with some national gold panics that went through. The price of gold bottomed out, and those were heavily invested. They lost a ton of what they had worked so hard to acquire. Mr. Woodruff being one of those. They had to make the hard decision to sell the mansion in the early 1880s. So in comes this beautiful couple right here. This is Nolan and Virginia Fontaine. Nolan Fontaine was born in Terre Haute, Indiana, but he was raised in Louisville. His family, the Fontaine family, they go back generations in Louisville, Kentucky. He came to Memphis in 1861 at the age of 21. And like many other men at that time, he was coming to establish some type of career, some type of business opportunities. First, though, he fell in love with Virginia Eanes. She was a local young lady, and they got married in 1864. Now, in 1883, he was the founder of one of the most successful cotton factory and wholesale grocery businesses in the United States. It was actually the largest and most successful in the United States and third in the world. He and his partner named Napoleon Hill. He was doing quite well because he came to Kentucky, a little inexperienced. He had some money, but it was family money. But he was 21 years of age. The 19th century, a 21-year-old man, and you're an adult, son. A little bit inexperienced, but he was educated and he was very shrewd. So when he partnered with Napoleon Hill, it was nothing but good times, you know, building businesses. And cotton was king here in Memphis. That's what we used to be called, King Cotton. So he got in on the right market. Mr. Woodruff had dabbled in it, but everything of his took a beating after the yellow fever and the gold panics I spoke of. So he and Virginia get married in 1864. In early 1883, he is really just getting to the top of his game, and his family is growing, and he knows that Mr. Woodruff is needing to sell the home on Adams Avenue. So he goes to Mr. Woodruff because they were business associates. They did know one another. How close they were as far as friends, we don't know, but they did know one another. But Mr. Fontaine also knew there was pride at stake. He couldn't just go up to Mr. Woodruff and say, Amos, I hear you broke. Give me your house. It was nothing like that. There was pride at stake. They struck a gentleman's agreement. They actually traded homes, and the Fontaines gave the Woodruffs $40,000. The Woodruffs were not destitute, but they had really fallen. Their fortune had really fallen. So I imagine that $40,000 and a simple home swap was a blessing to them. So Phoebe Woodruff could go and move into a very well-established, fashionable town home that had been established by the Fontaines. So she did not have to go even back to New Jersey or go and find some lower class housing. That would have been such a disgrace for Madam Phoebe. I would hate to think that would happen. So it was, we'll say, a win-win. But we don't know. We don't know. There was probably some heartache involved, a little bit of business maneuvering that maybe seems a little not quite ethical maybe to us today. We don't know. But they moved in 1883, 6 children. They would have 3 more that were born here in the mansion. They lost a child at 11 months old, but they still raised eight children here, 4 girls and 4 boys. Very well-loved family. They were the glamour couple here when they moved into onto Adams Avenue, Millionaires Row as it became known as. Because we look at them, they were young, they were beautiful, they're about 20 years younger than the Woodruffs. And they were, I made this reference before, the Brangelina of the day, but you know, Brangelina, they're divorced, but you get the reference, yeah? So they had well-known parties. Whenever some dignitaries, presidents, governors, President Grover Cleveland came to this mansion more than once. Mr. Fontaine was always at the forefront. He and Napoleon Hill and a few other distinguished gentlemen in town would be at the forefront of greeting the dignitaries. And they came from all over the world. And this was the couple that they wanted to meet. So, Mr. Fontaine has been a very successful businessman for many years in the city of Memphis. He passed away at the age of 72 in September of 1912. Lovely Virginia lived about 16 years longer, and she died peacefully upstairs in her bedroom in 1928, surrounded by children and grandchildren.
Wow.
We strive to continue the legacy of both families today. We hope that we do them proud. We're very respectful. We expect that of our guests. We have very few rules when you come here. The usual, don't touch our antiques, etc. Don't taunt anybody. Don't look at a photo and you know, just be respectful, be kind. Our lovely proper parlor, also known as the ballroom. The mansion is large, but it is not large enough to have a separate ballroom. Now, the families, being prominent families with full social calendars, socializing would have been a norm. And this room was very important when they were entertaining. And the servants would come and move all the furniture out, leaving this lovely large room for guests to mingle and dance, etc. So this was, let's say, the party room of the home. And that's why we refer to it as the ballroom, and technically it's the proper parlor. Every Victorian home, no matter the economic status of the home, they would have had a proper parlor. That's something you would strive for in your home. So what we have on now on our mannequins, we are very fortunate here at the Woodruff Fontaine that we have had so many generous benefactors, and they've not only donated furnishings, china, crystal, etc., but also beautiful, beautiful vintage clothing. These are from turn of the century going into the early 1910s and teens. If you want to say all the fun was held here on the first floor with the parties and the soirees, well, the second floor, that's where all the family secrets played out. That's where the families lived the majority of their lives. Up here on the second and third floors, private family time. Back in the 19th century and in portions of the 20th century, of course, outside entertainment had become available, but on average, a family just didn't go to the cinema or the plays or the opera houses as often as you would think. They did start going more and more as it became available, but the majority of their personal time was spent here in their homes. Their homes were their world, and their world was inside their homes. Now the Fontaines, they did a lot of outside socializing. Memphis had some very fine opera houses at one time. We were in the cutting edge of having the early cinemas where those new films were being shown, and there were all kinds of outside entertainment venues that started becoming available. However, we as a modern society, we do a lot of socializing outside of our home. We do the majority of things outside of our home, I think it's safe to say. I know there are millions and millions of homebodies around the world, but we also as a people like to be out in the world. At that time, their home was their world. So they spent a huge part of time upstairs. This was the master bedroom of the home. We do have some of the Fontaine's belongings here. That was Mrs. Fontaine's beautiful mahogany writing desk. That was a mirror that belonged to the Fontaines. It's up there on the mantle now. When the Woodruffs moved in, their daughter Molly, who was 19 at the time, got married downstairs. And when she came back from a 2-month honeymoon in New Orleans, she and her new husband settled here. This was their bedroom. On the other side of the bed is a door that connects to the second room, and that was their parlor. Okay. So that's the way it would work in those days. Again, you didn't really hang out so much on the first floor. If you weren't entertaining, so you spent your family time up here. So bedroom, connected parlor. Like across the hall, there's a connected parlor from the family, the master bedroom. We're open Wednesday through Sunday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m.
And people can go online to purchase tickets?
They absolutely can go online to purchase tickets. They can come in the day of and purchase them right here in the mansion, or they can go online for their convenience. We offer both, and we take credit cards online, of course, credit cards and cash in the museum once you get here.
Awesome. What do you hope that guests take away after the tour?
I will tell you, the best thing for me is when our guests compliment with things such as, it is so beautiful, it looks as though someone's still living here. It is exquisite. I always get a really good feeling when people say, it looks like someone's living here, it's alive with beautiful furnishings. That is what I love, because I'm like, that's what we strive for. We stage the home as though the family is still here. Families that lived here, that they're still here, they're carrying out their daily routine. So people will get a sense of the hard work and the preservation efforts. It's not easy. I mean, honestly, it's not. It's run on a tiny staff and some volunteers. We wouldn't be here without volunteers. I started as a volunteer. So we like it when people compliment our hard work. We know it's paid off.